Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. I have no idea where I heard the story that I'm about to tell you. If it was maybe from a friend, somebody I knew, or if it was like some thing from the internet or the book or something. I don't know. But there was a story I heard once in childhood about a kid who was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a little rebel rascal, be like James Dean, do naughty things. I'm going to smoke a cigarette. I'm going to do it. I saw some ads and stuff, and it looks like the cool people smoke the cigarettes. I'm going to try it. Take that, Dad. And so he tried a cigarette, right? And then Dad found out, and he was like, oh, so you like cigarettes, do you? Okay. Well, here, have a cigarette. And he made his kid eat a cigarette. The kid's stomach got upset. And he's like, no. If you want to be cool and smoking one cigarette makes you cool, maybe it'd be cooler yet if you ate the whole pack. And he made him eat the whole pack. I do not hold this story out as being exemplary of good parenting. I just remember the story and I remember the impulse. And it was, well, if you like this so much, let's go even further with it. And it would seem that this human impulse toward doing things in excess as a means of discipline or correction is a very, very old one, because all the way back into ancient times, we see that the most elaborate torture methods and punishments all seem to have this kind of theme to it. As we've discussed over the last few days on this very magical, memorable week of the podcast that I've lovingly dubbed Torture Week, all the torture, it's there for a reason. They're not just making stuff up. They're taking the thing that you are into, and then they twist it around to be like, oh, well, if you like that so much, let's do this. You like being lifted up in front of people to be celebrated, like exalted in front? Cool. Well, let's just put you up on this stick. We'll lift you up real high. We'll see how you like that. There, now you're in front of everyone. You like that? Oh, you like drinking wine, do you, King Cyrus? Well, how about we cut off your head and put it in a bag full of wine and you can drink all you want? Oh, you like gold, do you, Crassus? Well, maybe you'd like a ton of gold just dumped right down your throat in liquid form. Oh, that's super. And then you get into the Reformation era where pretty much everybody didn't like the people who did baptism by immersion. And so the Anabaptists got punished. Was like, oh, so you like the baptism, do you? Well, if a quick dunk underwater is good for your relationship with God, don't you think you might like 45 minutes underwater? Well, baptize you even more. And here in Matthew 27, we're getting the same kind of treatment for Jesus before we even get to the cross. We're getting the, oh, you're a king. That's adorable. Well, if you like being a king, then you'd probably need some kingly robes, wouldn't you? And wouldn't you want like the whole outfit? You'd need a little king hat. And who could be a proper king without a king stick? Well, we got one right here. That's the scene that we're getting in Matthew 27, starting in verse 27. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his hand and knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. Now, look, on the one hand, this might seem really creative. You're like, Donnie, Carl, Steve, that is, offensive, but it's kind of your job, and that is top-notch mockery. Got to give you points for creativity. But do we? Really? Is it actually that creative? I would argue no. I would argue that it's more 7th grade locker room bully level creativity, which is, what's the formula here? You just take the thing somebody does or is into or represents that you don't like, and then you just exaggerate it and turn it in a way to whoop on them and beat on them. Nah, they're just following an age-old formula in a rather boring, uninspired, lazy way. And I'm sure to them it's hilarious, not just because of this claim, but it's hilarious because how can you be king of the Jews? There is no Jewish kingdom. Think about that for a second. They're mocking him because he is being held out as the king of something that no longer exists. It has been replaced and supplanted by the power of Rome. The representative of Rome, the actual sovereign of your little people group here in this little back corner of the larger world, is governed by, look, that's the guy. He's the representative of the emperor, the god king, who by proxy just ordered your execution. And what are you going to do about it, stick and crown boy? Oh, that's right. Nothing, because you can't do anything about it because you're the king of a not thing. You're the king of a dead entity that no longer exists. Now, Just think about what's happening between the lines here. Think about all the stuff that we've talked about in Matthew. And this middle schoolish, nonsensical bullying mockery from a handful of dolts who think they're being terribly clever here weirdly and accidentally points to things that are thematically true and consistent through all of the law and the prophets in the story. Jesus said in Matthew 5:17, he didn't come to abolish all of that story. He came to fulfill it. And Matthew holds our hand and shows us like 50 or 100 different ways that he overtly completes the story. But for every one that Matthew spells out that's overt, we got like a jillion more that are subtle and just woven into the story. And here's another one. What's the problem of the Old Testament, right? Narratively, what's the problem? You got this. Just shriek it out wherever you are at, whoever you're talking with right now. Just do it. Yell it into your Zoom meeting. The problem is that the whole Messiah thing is supposed to be this great king who's going to rule on the throne of David forever, but there is no more throne of David. It got conquered multiple times by Assyria. Well, Assyria conquered the north, but Babylon, and then Persia, and then Alexander, and then Alexander's generals, and then Rome in the form of a republic, and then Rome in the form of an empire. And Rome is going to beat up on them a couple more times yet. There's no throne left. There's nothing. That's the problem. You got this great promise that could make the whole world better. There's supposed to be a king, a Messiah, who sits on this throne and brings these beautiful values into focus. But if there's no throne to sit on, how the heck is that going to work? And so these soldiers, thinking they're being terribly clever and mocking him with the fake, ugly regalia of a pauper king, think that they're pointing out an absurdity, but what they're actually pointing out is how even though history makes it look like the deck is stacked totally against God in the same way that the walls of Jericho are stacked against God by combating it with trumpets, or that the deck is stacked totally against God with the sovereign of all of Persia deciding and being bound by law that he's going to kill all the Jews and only having one little girl standing between genocide and redemption. So here, this just points out further how stacked against God the deck appears to be historically in bringing about the completion of these promises, wherein this king with these good values of this great and lasting kingdom comes into his reign and people see it and recognize it and bend the knee to this king and to this kingdom. It looks like it can't happen because there's nowhere for that king to be. But what these guys don't know is while they think they're just having a good old time and chuckling at another daily execution, what they're actually doing is playing a vital role in putting Jesus on his throne. They think they're going to mock him by putting him in this outfit. They think they're going to mock him by propping him up high for everybody to see, like some false claimant or some false ruler. But in doing so, they're playing their part in him actually ascending to a throne before humanity in a way that everybody is going to see and acknowledge eventually. These executioners are right on a certain level. There is a problem here. Jesus is held out as being the king who sits on a non-existent throne. There's a huge hurdle here, a huge problem. But what's happening, even by their actions, is that God is establishing that throne and demonstrating that it transcends political power, that it transcends Alexander, that it transcends Cyrus the Great, that it transcends Rome, that it transcends Tiberius. This is bigger than all of the military, political machinations, all of the court intrigue, bigger than the power of all of the human-made thrones in all of history. This one is different, and the king who sits on it is going to be different, and how he gets there is going to be different, and he can't be mocked, even though these guys are trying super, super hard to apply their formulaic seventh-grade bullying mockery to him. They think they're saying, you want to be a king? Here's a king outfit. But like so many other characters throughout Matthew who are enemies of the king and say things about him, they unwittingly hit the nail on the head, no pun intended, but also I guess it totally works. Jesus is the king, and they've accidentally rightly named him. Interesting stuff. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.